Peter Washington did not raise his voice when Angela came home and found the locks changed, the joint cards frozen, and every designer bag from the hall table sealed inside brown evidence boxes labeled with dates, receipts, and screenshots. Her phone buzzed before she could speak. One message came from Logan, saying he had been fired. Another came from her church group, removing her from the Women's Council. A third was Peter's email, calm and cold. The divorce had already been filed downtown in Chicago that morning. On the kitchen island sat one folder. Across it, in black marker, were 2 words, read carefully. Inside the folder were hotel invoices, text chains, bank transfers, group chats, and a sworn statement from Logan himself. Peter had organized everything with tabs like a trial lawyer, though he was only a high school counselor from Bronzeville with a memory sharp enough to cut steel. Angela opened to the first page and saw a screenshot of him mocking his clothes, his prayers, his patience, and his late mother's ring in a private thread with her friends. At the bottom, Peter had typed one sentence. I forgave disrespect until it became a team sport against my name. Then I decided facts would answer everyone. The worst part was not the cheating. It was how complete the collapse had become before Angela even knew Peter had moved. Logan's name was gone from the lease on the downtown loft he rented with borrowed money. The SUV Angela loved had been returned after Peter proved the note came from an account she drained without permission. Her closest friends, the same ones who called themselves her sisters, were suddenly silent because Peter had sent each husband, fiancé, employer, and pastor a carefully documented packet containing only facts, dates, and their own exact words. He never exaggerated. He simply stopped protecting people who laughed at him. 3 months earlier, Peter still believed marriage could survive a season of ugliness. Angela had changed after meeting a louder, flashier crowd through a networking brunch on Chicago's South Side. What began as happy hours turned into nights out in West Loop lounges, secret trips disguised as conferences, and group chats built around making Peter the joke of every story. She laughed when they called him soft because he worked with teenagers instead of chasing money. She laughed when they called him country because he still said grace before meals. Peter heard little pieces of this poison for months, but love kept translating betrayal into temporary confusion. The first crack came on a rainy Thursday in Hyde Park when Peter picked Angela up from a salon appointment she claimed took 4 hours. Her phone lit up on the dashboard with a message from one friend. Girl, Logan said your husband looked hurt at brunch. I almost felt bad. Peter did not confront her then. He drove home through wet streets, bought takeout from her favorite catfish spot, and listened while she lied with the ease of someone who believed kindness was weakness. That night, after she slept, he sat in the dark living room and understood he was not confused anymore. He was being managed, tested, and mocked. Peter did not become ruthless overnight. He became precise. He started by checking what he had ignored: bank statements, calendar entries, deleted email folders, mileage logs, and Angela's sudden obsession with keeping her phone face down. He copied records, printed receipts, backed up voicemails, and photographed everything without damaging a thing. When his cousin Marcus, a paralegal on the West Side, asked why he looked exhausted, Peter finally told the truth. Marcus listened, leaned back, and said the line Peter would remember forever: if people built a lie together, let them drown separately. That day, grief stopped steering, and strategy took the wheel for good. Logan Pierce worked in corporate sales and dressed like every room owed him applause. He had smooth skin, expensive watches, and the kind of grin that made weak boundaries feel glamorous. Angela met him at a rooftop mixer where everybody talked about partnerships and nobody talked about character. Logan told her Peter was safe but small, stable but forgettable, faithful but boring. Her friends repeated it until it sounded like revelation. They fed her every selfish fantasy with the language of empowerment, as if betrayal became noble when wrapped in hashtags and heels. Logan did not seduce Angela alone. Her audience rehearsed the script until she believed it. Peter met Logan only twice before everything broke. The first time was at a charity gala where Logan held Angela's elbow too long and looked Peter up and down like a man pricing furniture. The second time was at Saturday brunch where Angela's friends laughed a little too hard whenever Peter spoke. Logan asked whether Peter ever thought about upgrading his life, and Angela smirked into her mimosa. Peter smiled politely then, but he never forgot the way the whole table watched him afterward, like they were waiting to see whether he would bark, beg, or break. Instead, he paid the bill and memorized every face there. At first, Peter planned only to leave. He met with a divorce attorney in the loop, learned what was legally his, and prepared to exit with dignity. Then he discovered Angela had not only cheated but used money from the scholarship nonprofit Peter founded in his mother's name to fund one trip. The transfer was small enough to hide inside ordinary spending, but to Peter it felt wholly and unforgivable. That nonprofit paid for books, winter coats, and community college fees for kids with almost nothing. Angela had stolen from that fund to impress a man who called Peter basic. Mostly ended there. After that, consequences began and multiplied. Peter's attorney, Denise Holloway, was a straight-back woman from Oak Park who wore calm-like armor. She studied every page he brought and asked careful questions until the whole picture came into focus. Infidelity, financial misuse, defamation, and coordinated humiliation. Denise told Peter something that steadied him. Revenge was messy, documentation was clean. If he wanted to win, he needed silence, timing, and discipline. So Peter said nothing at home. He cooked dinner, drove Angela to family events, nodded through excuses, and built a case that got heavier every day. He was not pretending things were fine. He was letting the trap finish building around them all. Meanwhile, Angela grew bolder. She stopped hiding the little insults because she believed Peter's patience meant blindness. She compared him to richer men, mocked his used pickup truck, and told him he needed more edge. One evening in their Beverly kitchen, she said, almost lazily, "Peter, you are a good man, but good is not enough anymore." He looked at her and saw no guilt, only appetite. Something settled inside him then, not rage but finality. He understood that some people do not stumble into betrayal. They audition for it, rehearse it, and then act shocked when the curtain drops. Angela had mistaken decency for permanent access. Peter's brutal part began with truth delivered to the right people in the right order. First came Logan's employer. Peter sent evidence showing Logan had used company travel reimbursements for personal hotel stays linked to the affair, that included screenshots proving Logan discussed clients while intoxicated around unsecured guests. Human resources moved quickly. Second came the board of Angela's image consulting startup, where Peter quietly proved she had billed shared household expenses as business networking costs. Third came the couples in Angela's friend circle who had been lied to for months. Peter never wrote a threat. He wrote timelines. The facts did the humiliating. He only arranged the light. One by one, the support system Angela worshipped began to crack. Tasha stopped answering because her fiancé discovered she had covered for Angela using a fake girls' retreat. Monique's husband learned she had helped book the hotel suite where Angela and Logan met. Brielle's boutique sponsor dropped her after Peter forwarded voice notes of a mocking marriage while publicly branding herself as a family values influencer. Even Pastor Reggie, who hated mess, could not ignore the screenshots once 3 separate members confirmed they were real. The women who built whole identities around being bold and unbothered were suddenly begging each other to delete evidence Peter already possessed. Logan unraveled fastest. Men like him lived on image, and Peter stripped that image down to receipts. When Logan's company opened an internal audit, his smooth confidence curdled into frantic late-night calls Angela ignored at first, then returned with shaking hands. Peter knew because he had already moved his personal belongings into a condo in South Shore and redirected their mail through legal channels. By the time Angela understood how serious things were, Logan had been escorted from his office, his fam laptop seized, and his so-called friends were distancing themselves online. He texted her, "We need to get our story straight." Peter saw the screenshot and smiled. Still, Peter's deepest cut was not professional. It was personal reputation. Angela and her circle had painted him as controlling, insecure, and emotionally weak to justify treating him like a fool. So Peter answered that lie with radical transparency. He invited Angela's father, older brother, and Auntie Lorraine to Denise Holloway's office and placed every document on the conference table. He did not editorialize. He let them read. Her father's shoulders dropped as if somebody had removed his bones. Her brother stayed at the group chat printouts and whispered, "She said you were mistreating her." Peter nodded once and replied, "I know exactly what she said everywhere." Angela tried to regain control the next evening. She arrived at Peter's condo unannounced, mascara cracked, pride barely holding. She knocked hard enough to wake neighbors and demanded a conversation. Peter opened the door only because the building camera captured everything. She stepped inside, saw the bare order of his new life, and seemed offended by how complete it looked. No photographs of them remained. No framed vows, no wedding gifts, no second toothbrush. Just clean counters and a sealed box by the entry with her remaining items. Angela asked how he could do this so coldly. Peter answered, "Cold is truth without my protection around it." She cried then, but Peter had already learned that tears could mean sorrow, panic, embarrassment, or strategy. He listened while Angela blamed loneliness, pressure, bad friends, social media, and the attention Logan gave her when marriage felt ordinary. Peter let her finish. Then he slid a page across the table listing every lie she told over 5 months, each tied to a date, dollar amount, and witness. At the bottom was the non-profit transfer. Angela's face emptied when she saw it. Peter tapped the paper once. "You cheated on me," he said, "but you stole from children to impress a clown. Nobody can clean that part for you." Chicago moved as it always did, indifferent and relentless, but Peter noticed the city differently once he stopped carrying Angela's version of him. He took early walks along the lake, bought coffee from a small black-owned shop near 47th Street, and sat in his truck without dread before work. Students at school still needed guidance, still brought him college essays and pain they could barely name. In helping them, Peter remembered himself. He had spent years building a life rooted in service, steadiness, and earned respect. Angela and her circle treated those things like weaknesses because they were too shallow to measure value beyond applause or surface shine. When the divorce hearing approached, Angela changed tactics. The anger faded and bargaining arrived. She sent messages about history, chemistry, and how marriages survived worse every day. She said therapy could fix them. She said public embarrassment was punishment enough. She said Peter was not the man she married if he kept pushing. Denise advised him to respond only through counsel, and he did. At mediation, Angela's attorney attempted to soften her financial misconduct as bloated marital spending, but Denise produced time-stamped records, business filings, and transfer notes that flattened the room. Peter did not need speeches. The evidence had its own patient, merciless voice. Everyone heard it. Then came Logan's betrayal of Angela, which Peter had predicted from the start. Facing pressure from investigators and the threat of civil exposure, Logan signed a statement confirming the affair, the trips, the reimbursements, and the mocking messages Angela's circle exchanged about Peter. He did it to save himself, naturally, but the result was the same. Angela lost the one person she had blown up her life to protect. The man who promised her excitement and freedom folded the second consequences touched his salary and reputation. Peter read Logan's statement in Denise's office and felt no triumph, only clarity. Frauds always loved loyalty until they needed a sacrifice first. Word traveled fast through Black Chicago circles, especially when church, business, and social media all touched the same scandal. Peter never posted a thing online, but he did not interfere when truth reached daylight. Angela's carefully polished image as a self-made relationship mentor collapsed under the weight of recordings, receipts, and witness accounts. Invitations dried up. Partnerships vanished. The brunch crowd that once cheered her confidence now treated her name like smoke. Peter's own reputation, meanwhile, hardened into something almost untouchable. People called him gracious, disciplined, and stronger than anyone realized. They were partly right. What they could not see was how much pain it took. Angela's mother called Peter on a Sunday afternoon and asked to meet at a diner near Chatham. Peter almost declined, then agreed out of respect for the years he had spent loving that family. The older woman looked tired before she even sat down. She apologized for raising a daughter who confused attention with worth and friends with wisdom. Peter thanked her and kept his voice gentle. She asked whether anything could still be saved. Peter stirred his coffee and said something that made her cry quietly into a napkin. "A marriage can survive many things," he said, "but it cannot survive an organized campaign against one person's dignity." The final settlement landed harder than Angela expected because Peter had done his homework. Denise secured reimbursement, protected the nonprofit, and established clear separation of debt tied to Angela's hidden spending. Peter also kept the house proceeds insulated from the mess by proving which funds were his before the marriage and which accounts Angela had manipulated afterward. It was not flashy revenge. It was surgical. Angela left with less money, a ruined network, and the heavy knowledge that Peter had beaten her using patience, paper, and timing. He had not screamed, begged, chased, or fought in public. He had simply removed every cushion she expected to land on. After the decree was finalized, Peter did one thing nobody expected. He expanded the nonprofit. Instead of shrinking after the theft, he partnered with two principals, a Barber College mentor, and a retired accountant from his church to create a scholarship and emergency aid fund twice its original size. At the launch dinner, students from Englewood and Auburn Gresham stood at a podium and talked about coats, tuition, transit cards, and second chances. Peter listened from the back in a dark suit, hands folded. The woman who stole from children had become the reason more children would now be helped. That was the kind of comeback he respected most. Angela saw pictures from the launch through other people's pages because nobody had sent them directly. Peter was smiling in a way she had not seen for years, relaxed and unguarded, standing beside young men who looked at him like possibility. Logan was nowhere in sight. Neither were the glamorous women who once filled Angela's weekends with flattery and bad advice. She sat alone in a smaller apartment near Midway, scrolling through fragments of a life she had traded away for applause. For the first time, the silence around her was not punishment from Peter. It was the natural echo left when users and spectators finally moved on. Angela called once more on the first anniversary of the filing. Peter almost ignored it, then answered. She did not cry this time. Her voice sounded flatter, older, stripped of audience. She said she was in counseling, away from that circle, and trying to rebuild honestly. Peter told her he hoped she stayed committed to truth, not because it would fix them, but because lies had already cost too many people. She asked whether he hated her. He looked out across Lake Michigan, gray under winter clouds, and chose honesty. "No," he said. "Hate is too expensive. I just no longer carry your consequences. That burden belongs to you now." People around Peter often called his comeback brutal, and they were right, though not for the reasons gossip preferred. He did not ruin Angela with violence, humiliation videos, or public screaming. He ruined every false story that protected her. He separated truth from performance and made each person stand under what they had said and done. For people used to hiding inside group loyalty, that kind of exposure felt merciless. But Peter knew the real brutality had happened first. The laughing, the cheating, the theft, the rehearsal of his pain as entertainment. All he did afterward was remove the curtain and let daylight discipline everybody involved completely. By the next spring, Peter's life looked fuller than it ever had during his marriage. He coached a boys' mentoring group on Wednesdays, took his students to college tours on Saturdays, and started restoring an old motorcycle with Marcus in a South Side garage. Peace returned in practical ways first: better sleep, easier laughter, mornings without dread. Then confidence returned too. Not flashy confidence, but the kind built from surviving disrespect without becoming cruel. When people asked how he stayed so calm through such betrayal, Peter usually shrugged. The truth was simpler than they expected. Once he realized he was no longer loved, fear lost its leverage forever. There were still hard days. Some songs reopened memories. Some neighborhoods held shadows of old date nights and promises made in good faith. Betrayal did not disappear just because justice arrived. Peter let himself grieve that honestly. He mourned the woman Angela had once seemed to be, the family he almost built, the years he spent watering something already dying. But grief no longer made him weak. It made him exact about who deserved access to his peace. He learned to forgive himself for missing the signs, for defending her too long, for confusing loyalty with endurance. Healing, he discovered, was not softness. It was boundary made permanent. On a warm evening in June, Peter closed the scholarship office, stepped outside, and watched neighborhood kids race bikes under a fading orange sky. Marcus leaned against the doorway and asked whether all the loss had been worth the lesson. Peter thought about Angela, Logan, the vanished friends, the court filings, the screenshots, the nights of humiliation turned into evidence. Then he looked at the students whose futures had grown because he refused to collapse. Yes, he said finally, because they tried to make me the joke. Instead, I became the consequence. And somewhere across Chicago, the people who laughed first were still learning what that had cost. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.